The Baltimore Marriott loomed large, a monolith of glass and steel against the darkening sky. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white. The 2-hour drive from home had felt like an eternity, each mile a battleground of conflicting emotions. I was here to surprise Claire, my wife of 14 years, who was attending a conference. But the surprise was a carefully constructed facade, masking a deep-seated unease that had been gnawing at me for months. Our life together had been a tapestry woven with shared dreams, laughter, and the chaotic joy of raising our 2 children, Sarah and Jake. I loved Claire. I truly did. But lately, something had shifted, a subtle disharmony in the melody of our lives. Claire's late arrivals from work, once explained away with plausible excuses, now stretched into a pattern. Her laughter, once spontaneous and warm, now seemed strained, a performance rather than a genuine expression of joy. And her eyes held a distant, almost haunted look that made my stomach clench. I had tried to ignore the nagging voice of suspicion, to rationalize my fears as paranoia. I didn't want to be that husband, the jealous, insecure man who questioned his wife's every move. But the whispers of doubt grew louder, fueled by small, almost insignificant details. A lingering scent of unfamiliar cologne on her jacket. A hushed phone call that ended abruptly as I entered the room. A new, almost secretive air about her. This conference, so conveniently close to home, felt like an opportunity. A chance to finally confront my fears, whatever the outcome. I had booked a room at the Marriott under a false name, a measure of my desperation. I needed to know the truth. I parked the car, the engine ticking as it cooled, and stepped out into the crisp evening air. The hotel lobby buzzed with activity, conference attendees milling about, their voices a dull hum in my ears. I felt detached, as if observing the scene from a distance, my own life on hold, suspended in a state of agonizing uncertainty. I checked in, my hands clammy as I accepted the room key. I avoided eye contact with the clerk, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. I was acting like a spy, a character in a cheap detective novel, but the thought of Claire, possibly with another man, propelled me forward. The elevator ride was a blur. I stared at the numbers as they lit up, each floor a step closer to the unknown. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I imagined confronting Claire, the words tumbling out in a torrent of anger and hurt. I imagined her denial, her tears, her accusations of mistrust, and I imagined being wrong, my fears unfounded, and the shame that would follow, a bitter taste in my mouth. I reached Claire's floor and walked down the long, carpeted hallway. Each step echoed in the silence, amplifying the pounding in my ears. I stopped outside her door, my hand trembling as I held the key card. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. This was it. I swiped the card, the click of the lock sounding deafening in the stillness. I turned the handle slowly, careful not to make a sound. The door swung open, revealing Claire's room. She was there, sitting at the desk, her back to me, illuminated by the warm glow of a lamp. She was engrossed in paperwork, her brow furrowed in concentration, alone. Relief washed over me, so intense that I almost stumbled. I had been wrong. My fears were just that, fears, born of insecurity and imagination. A wave of shame washed over me. How could I have doubted her? "Claire?" I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Adam, what are you doing here?" "I thought I'd surprise you," I said, forcing a smile. "I was in the area and thought I'd take you to dinner." "Oh, honey," she said, getting up to hug me. "I'm so glad you're here." Her embrace felt genuine, her lips warm as she kissed me. My doubts began to recede, replaced by a wave of guilt for ever suspecting her. Maybe I had been paranoid, imagining things that weren't there. "I'm so glad you came," Claire said, her eyes sparkling. "Why don't you stay the night? We can catch up and I can tell you all about the conference." "That sounds wonderful," I said, my heart lightening. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," she said, her voice soft. We spent the next hour catching up, talking about the kids, our work, and everything in between. It felt like old times, like the spark that had drawn us together years ago was still there. I felt foolish for my suspicions, grateful for the relief that washed over me. As Claire went to take a shower, I sat on the bed, my mind at ease. I'd been wrong, and I was grateful for it. But as I sat there, my eyes fell on Claire's toiletry bag on the dresser. A flicker of unease returned. I remembered the condoms I'd found months ago, tucked away in her purse, a discovery that had first planted the seed of doubt in my mind. I had dismissed it then, telling myself it was a mistake, an anomaly. I hesitated, not wanting to pry, but the suspicion was too strong to ignore. I got up and walked over to the bag, my hands trembling as I unzipped it. And there they were, a pack of condoms, nestled among her toiletries, not one or two, but a full pack. The relief I'd felt earlier vanished, replaced by a cold dread. My suspicions had been right all along. Claire was cheating on me. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and numb. The image of Claire with another man flashed before my eyes, a searing image that burned into my brain. I sat on the bed staring at the condoms, my mind reeling. How could she do this to me, to our family? What had I done to deserve this? The questions swirled in my head, each one a fresh wave of pain. I felt betrayed, humiliated, my trust shattered into a million pieces. I felt a surge of anger, a desire to confront her, to demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to think, to figure out what to do next. I needed a plan. I decided on a petty, almost childish act of revenge. I found a safety pin in her bag and carefully poked tiny holes in each condom. It was a small, insignificant gesture, but it gave me a sense of control, a way to strike back at her betrayal. Then I called Rob, my best friend, the kind of guy who would do anything for me, no questions asked. I told him I needed a favor, a small one, but one that could change everything. "I need you to call me in about an hour," I said, my voice tight. "Pretend there's an emergency at home, something that requires my immediate attention." "What kind of emergency?" Rob asked, his voice curious. "Just say there's a burst pipe at the school," I said. "That should do it." "Okay," Rob said. "I'll call you around 7. I hung up, my mind made up. I couldn't stay here, not after what I'd discovered. I needed to get away, to clear my head and figure out what to do next. I needed to process the information, to make a plan. When Claire came out of the shower, wrapped in a fluffy hotel robe, I acted as if nothing had happened. I forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. We went down to the hotel restaurant for dinner, the conversation strained and awkward. I couldn't look her in the eye, knowing what she'd done. I felt like a fool, a dupe. As we ate, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal, a violation of the trust we'd shared for so many years. How could she be so happy, so carefree, knowing what she'd done? The casualness of her betrayal felt like a slap in the face. Just as we were finishing our meal, my phone rang. It was Rob, right on schedule. "Hello?" I answered, my voice carefully neutral. "Adam, it's Rob," he said, his voice urgent. "There's been a burst pipe at the school. It's a mess and they need you there right away." "Okay," I said, pretending to be alarmed. "I'll be right there." I hung up and turned to Claire, my face apologetic. "I'm so sorry," I said, "but I have to go. There's an emergency at home." "Oh, honey," she said, her voice disappointed. "That's too bad. I was hoping we could spend the night together." "I know," I said, "but I have to go. I'll call you tomorrow." I knew I wouldn't. I kissed her goodbye, my heart heavy with a mix of anger and sadness. As I drove home, the events of the evening replayed in my mind, each detail a fresh wound. Claire, Her smiling face as she greeted me, the casual intimacy of our conversation, the warmth of her embrace, it all felt like a carefully constructed lie, a performance designed to deceive me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. The anger simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. I arrived home to an empty house. Sarah and Jake were at a sleepover, a fact I had conveniently forgotten in the turmoil of the evening. The silence amplified my solitude, the emptiness of the house, a stark reminder of what I stood to lose. I walked through the rooms, each one filled with memories, family dinners around the oak table, bedtime stories whispered in the soft glow of the nightlight, lazy Sunday mornings spent in pajamas, the smell of coffee and pancakes filling the air. These were the moments I cherished, the fabric of my life with Claire, the life she had so carelessly jeopardized. I went to bed, but sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of Claire and her betrayal. How could she do this to me? Why? The questions swirled in my head, each one a sharp, piercing pain. I thought about the kids, how this would affect them, the confusion and hurt they would inevitably experience. I felt a wave of protectiveness towards them, a fierce desire to shield them from the fallout of Claire's actions. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted and drained. I went downstairs and made myself a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the empty street. The world outside seemed indifferent to my pain, the sun shining, birds chirping, life going on as usual. I felt disconnected, as if I were living in a parallel universe, a stranger in my own life. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage, not after what Claire had done. The trust was broken, perhaps irrevocably, but I also knew that I didn't have enough evidence to prove her infidelity. I had my suspicions, the condoms, the lingering feeling of unease, but nothing concrete that I could use in a divorce. I decided to follow her, to gather proof of her affair. It was a risky move, I knew, a descent into the murky world of surveillance and suspicion. But I was desperate. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I needed proof, solid evidence that I could use to protect myself and my children. The next few weeks were a blur. I followed Claire to her office, to her meetings, to her secret rendezvous with Tom. I watched them from a distance, my heart aching with every stolen glance, every whispered word, every touch. I felt like a voyeur, a silent observer in a play I didn't want to watch. But I forced myself to continue, driven by a need for closure, a desire to understand the depth of her betrayal. I took photos, capturing stolen moments of intimacy, hushed conversations in dimly lit restaurants, lingering hugs that lingered a little too long. I recorded their phone conversations, snippets of whispered endearments, coded messages, and furtive plans. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find, meticulously documenting their affair, building a case against her in my mind. It was a painful process, a constant reminder of her deception, but I knew it was necessary. I had to protect myself, to protect my children. One day I met Janet, Tom's wife. I had discovered her existence through my investigation, a fact I had initially dismissed as irrelevant. But as I delved deeper, I realized that Janet was another victim, betrayed by the same two people who had shattered my world. I contacted Janet, introducing myself as a concerned acquaintance. We met at a small coffee shop, a neutral ground where we could share our pain without fear of judgment. Janet was a beautiful woman, elegant and poised, but her eyes held a deep sadness, a reflection of the betrayal she had endured. We talked for hours, sharing our stories, our pain, our anger. We discovered a shared sense of violation, a common understanding of the devastation caused by infidelity. We realized that we were in the same boat, both victims of Claire and Tom's deceit. We were bound by our shared experience, united in our desire for justice. We decided to work together, to combine our evidence and take them down. It was a partnership born out of pain, a shared desire to expose the truth and reclaim our lives. We were no longer alone in our suffering. We had found an ally, someone who understood our pain, someone who could help us navigate the difficult road ahead. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. We gathered more evidence, corroborating our stories, filling in the gaps. We talked to lawyers, exploring our legal options, understanding the complexities of divorce and custody battles. We planned our next move, strategizing how to expose Claire and Tom's affair, how to minimize the damage to our families. It was a long and arduous process, fraught with emotional turmoil, but we were determined to see it through. Finally, the day came when we were ready to confront them. We had amassed a substantial amount of evidence, photos, recordings of phone conversations, eyewitness accounts, financial records that revealed Tom's payments to Claire. We were ready to expose their secret and demand justice. But before we made our move, we decided to conduct our own investigation. We wanted to learn more about Tom, his past, his relationship with Claire. We hired a private investigator to delve deeper into his background, to uncover any hidden truths. We soon learned that Tom was a serial cheater, a man with a long history of infidelity. He had been married several times, and each marriage had ended because of his unfaithfulness. He was a master manipulator, adept at charming women and convincing them to ignore their obligations. He preyed on vulnerable women, using his wealth and charisma to lure them into his web of deceit. We also learned that Claire was in dire financial straits. She had accumulated a significant amount of debt, a fact she had carefully concealed from me. Tom had offered her a way out, promising to solve her financial problems if she would be with him. He had used her vulnerability to his advantage, exploiting her desperation for his own selfish purposes. The revelations were shocking. I couldn't believe that Claire could be so deceitful, so willing to betray our family for money and the fleeting attention of another man. I felt a profound sense of disillusionment. My image of Claire shattered into a million pieces. But we were not going to give up. We decided to fight for our families, for our happiness. We knew it would be difficult, that we would have to endure a lot of pain and humiliation, but we were prepared for the battle. And then came the day when we decided to reveal their secret. We gathered all the evidence and went to the office of the company where Claire worked. We wanted to talk to her boss, to expose her immoral behavior, and to demand her dismissal. We hoped to inflict some measure of public shame, to hold her accountable for her actions. But when we arrived at the office, we learned that Claire had already resigned. She had left a few days ago, without providing any explanation. She had simply packed her belongings and disappeared, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. We were stunned. We had not expected her to leave so abruptly, so quietly. We had anticipated a confrontation, a dramatic showdown, where we would expose her lies and demand retribution. But Claire had chosen a different path. She had chosen to flee, to avoid the consequences of her actions. She had taken the easy way out, leaving Adam and Janet to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. We did not know where she had gone. She had cut off all contact with her family and friends, disappearing without a trace. We left her a message through a mutual acquaintance, but she never responded. I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was angry, hurt, and disappointed. I was also relieved that I didn't have to endure a messy public confrontation. I was tired of the lies, the deception, the constant pain. I just wanted it to be over. We decided not to pursue her. We had enough evidence to file for divorce to protect our children and to move on with our lives. We had achieved our primary goal, to free ourselves from the clutches of Claire and Tom's betrayal. We filed for divorce, each of us seeking sole custody of our children. The divorce proceedings were long and arduous, filled with legal complexities and emotional battles. But in the end, we prevailed. We were granted custody of our children, securing their future, protecting them from the fallout of their mother's actions. We started a new chapter in our lives, rebuilding our shattered worlds, healing our wounds, and learning to trust again. It was a difficult journey, filled with setbacks and tears, but we persevered, driven by our love for our children and our desire for happiness. And Claire? She remained elusive, a ghost from our past, a painful reminder of what we had lost. We never heard from her again. She had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a legacy of pain and unanswered questions. But we learned to live without her. We learned to heal, to find joy in our lives again. We learned that even after the deepest betrayal, it is possible to pick up the pieces and move on.